Prof. Indika and Dr. Pandula. Over to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Iska, for that very kind introduction. And on behalf of the College of Medical Educationists, a very warm welcome to all of you. And myself and Dr. Pandula will be the co-resource persons for this workshop. So the workshop format will be, I'll be starting with a very brief presentation, and then Dr. Pandula will be taking over, and then we'll be following up with questions and answers and the discussion, the interactive session. Yeah. So again, apologies about the less than ideal settings that I am in, because Dr. Iska has mentioned previously, we are these days 20 hours with the National Operations Center, so that maybe that's the reason that I had to join from there. But anyhow, we'll start the workshop soon, and with the presentation. Dr. Pandula, would you like to speak a few words before we start?
Yes, sir, thank you. Welcome everyone, and good morning. As Professor Indika mentioned, today's session, as the introduction, as you already know, is about effective online teaching, how to become an effective online teacher. But we will focus largely on the practical aspects of it rather than mostly theory-based discussions. And we hope that you will also share with us your experiences, because we have now been into about the second year of the pandemic, and we have gone through online tools and have done our teaching sessions online, have engaged online. So we are all have a lot of experience. So it is in that kind of a backdrop that we are doing this session. Therefore, there's a lot of experience within this group, and please do share with your experiences as well using the chat. And as Prof. Indika said, we initially will start on focusing on performing in a live session, which Dr. Prof. Indika will elaborate, and we will engage in a discussion. And then we will move on to instructional designing, which talks about content development. We'll be focused largely on making a slides presentation for online. What are the certain things that we need to discuss, and so on. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Pandula. So yes, the practical part of this workshop will be mainly handled by Dr. Pandula Siribhadan, because as you are aware, he has been supporting many of you related to the online learning planning and the design aspects, so on and so forth. And therefore, he is the main resource person related to the practical aspect and the technical areas. We'll start with a brief presentation on the basics related to the video conferencing that we are mostly engaged at the moment. One thing we have to say is that online teaching is not equivalent to video conferencing that all of us are very familiar. However, due to the new normal situation, due to restrictions, now many of us tend to use the online teaching through video conferencing like Zoom technology more effective and interactive. And after that, we'll be moving into the next session or the next presentation. Okay, so this will be the brief discussion about the education in the new normal, how this will be basically they make you the best use would be made from the online learning and the video conference facilities. So this will be the initial presentation, how to make online lectures like this, video conferencing online lectures like this more engaging and more interesting. Okay, so it's a very brief session. We'll first discuss what are the effective use of available technology for online teaching, okay? And then how to plan an interactive online lecture. Then Dr. Pandula will be moving into the design of instructional material for online lectures. And finally, what are the different practical questions, different practical tips and suggestions when we are conducting an interactive online session. All right. So Right now, what we are using is a video conferencing application, Zoom technology. Okay, that's very, very important. So how we can effectively use them? Because one concern when it comes to countries like ours is the belief that the resources are very limited. The technology is not there. It is not true. Actually, we have adequate resources. If we use them effectively, we can conduct a very effective online teaching session. Okay, so this is what we are going to discuss first. The available technology. Now there are, even when it comes to video conferencing, there are many expensive applications, many commercial applications. Okay? Having said that, what we have with us is actually adequate for the purpose. So we'll discuss that first. I'm sure by now, most of you are familiar with the Zoom basics. Okay? I'll be focusing mainly on Zoom and using that as an example because of the simple reason this is what you are familiar with. Due to the new normal situation and the current situation of travel restrictions, now everyone is mainly doing everything through Zoom. So I'll use that as an example, but the principles are the same. One simple thing is this, I'm sure you are aware how to unmute your microphone, okay, or how to stop or start the video, the raise hand feature, the chat feature, okay, sharing the screens, breakout rooms, all these things. Okay, so these are very, very basic things that I'm sure which all of you are very, very familiar with. Yeah, I'm just showing maybe a screenshot. Say the muting, unmuting can be easily done here by clicking on that. Starting video can be easily done with that. Okay, if you want to take part in the chat by clicking on this, you can type in your messages. Okay, can be done very easily. If you want to see who are in the participant list, again can be done very easily. So these simple basics which I am sure all of you are very familiar. And similarly, the sharing screen, where you need to go to the share screen function, which I am doing at the moment. Right now, what I am doing is sharing my screen, where you select this area where this highlighted and click on the share button. With that, you will be sharing whatever that is there. If you have put your PowerPoint presentation in the slideshow mode, straight away you can share this PowerPoint presentation. Or if you want to share a document on the desktop, you can do the same. My only advice is when you are sharing your PowerPoint or desktop, don't try to open them at that moment. Keep them open. If you want to share a particular document or a PowerPoint presentation from your desktop, okay, don't search for that document while you are searching. Keep that open, keep that on, then you can straight away move into desktop sharing. That's one thing, one simple rule that you can learn. Yeah, when it comes to interactivity, assigning participants, creating breakout rooms, all these are very, very important. And video conferencing, there are different roles. At the moment, I am a co-host. Similarly, there's a host who can do basically manage anything within that session, and there are panelists, and all of your participants. So different uh, participants, stakeholders have different roles. The host or co-host have privileges like assigning into rooms, breakout rooms, or maybe screen sharing, so on and so forth. Okay? Yeah. So that also something that you need to be familiar, which are not going to into details right now because we assume that you have the basic understanding of this. If you don't, actually, you can basically search and play around and find out what are the different roles of the co-host, panelists, so on and so forth. Okay? Yeah. So the Zoom basics and how to join audio, all these things, and taking part in the chat. Okay. Technical application. Okay. Now, if you are organizing a particular session, always good to have alternative host also, because we never know when technology breaks down. technology can break down from my end, from your end, anyone's end. That's always possible, especially in a situation or a country like ours. Sometimes the internet speed may not be very good. There can be power cuts. All these things can happen. So to be on the safe side, designate an alternative host. Very important. And always, before you start your session, you can go to Zoom preferences. Okay, you can go to Zoom preferences and check the video quality and the sound quality. Okay, so all these are very important. These are basically the home pages. You can always go back to the Zoom home page and you can go to the preferences, and when you check on video, you can check the video quality or even the sound quality. All these are very important before you start a session. It's like this. This may be very familiar to you. If you can't remember, what you can do is, when in the Zoom panel up there is one menu option called preferences. When you click on that, you get all these. So you can check the audio quality, or you can check the video quality. If you want to use a virtual background, that's also very possible. Okay, yeah. So all these things you can do as hands-on. Yeah, on-site arrangement. Internet connection has to be stable. Try to join early. In that case, if there are any problems or issues, you can basically attend to that. Ideally, find a quiet place without interruptions and background noise, and have a plain background like a wall. That is much better than having a cluttered background. The background that I am using at this moment is actually not ideal. The background is quite cluttered. This is not the way, but unfortunately, due to the current situation of the country, we had to be here in 24 hours in the national operation. So that's one reason. But having said that, the ideal way is have a plain background, or you can use even a virtual background like Dr. Pandula has been used. So cluttered background may not be ideal. Virtual background also it's possible, but use a good virtual background with good technical quality, image quality. Now you have seen Dr. Rizka has been using a very attractive background, which is very nice. Dr. Pandul also using a good, nice background. You can see them as they get back. You can even use videos, but there may be some technical inputs also. Dr. Rizka, you can also turn on your virtual background. So then you can see the different virtual backgrounds that are available. Some computers, based on their version, you can straight away select the virtual background. But for ideal result, what we call a green screen, a green colored background is important. It can be a proper screen, or it can be even maybe a nice uniform green cloth, or even a board would be added. But as long as that is uniform and there's no reflection, that is good. And Dr. Pandul later he can basically provide any additions about the green screen. And Dr. Pandul, would you like to say anything about the green screen right now?
Yeah, basically, as
virtual background.
Yeah, basically what we mean by a green screen is that you allow the software to identify your background from you, basically. So if you want your computer, not necessarily only in Zoom, but in other audiovisual softwares as well, the general practice is to use a green colored screen, and it may be anything, uniform green colored screen. That is a color that these software recognize as the background, and it can then differentiate you or the person in front of it and the background, and therefore we can superimpose anything to that particular background. And in many of the movies that you see, especially these Hollywood movies, whatever the special effects happen in the background, and that has been superimposed into that scene. So only the actor is there in a green colored environment. There's nothing on the ground or on the background, but later on those sceneries can be added easily. And if there are other actors like moving people also, if they also wear green, they can also be eliminated easily from the scene. So it is something similar. So if you have a green color background, it is easy for the software to identify you and clearly demarcate what the background is, and therefore applying a virtual background will be of much more smoother. But we are at the moment not using anything. The alternative to this is for you to have good light from the front. Now I am now sitting in front of a window, and therefore the light comes directly to my face. If I'm not getting this, then of course you have to have a light source in front of you. And when you have a light source in front of you, you get illuminated, and thereby your background and you can be contrasted, right? So that is the same thing that you do with the green screen as well. So therefore, these are a few things that you don't need a specific light. If you're doing it in a daytime, you can sit in front of the window. However, you should not sit in front of the window facing the other way around. So if the light is coming from your back, then you will get blurred, or your appearance will become darker, and therefore you always have to have your light coming from the front and not necessarily from the back. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pandula. I think that's very useful information for all of you regarding the use of the virtual background. Yeah. So some examples. Now, when you go to the preferences, you can share whatever image that you want to use as virtual background. But anyway, it has to be something that is appropriate for the session that we are doing. So visually as well as the quality wise and the image wise. Yeah. So this is the way to do it. You can go to virtual background and select it. If you don't select, if you use none option, then no virtual background will be there. Otherwise, you can select for the images that we have previously identified, and it has to be according to the specification and requirement which is there, and Dr. Pandula very clearly mentioned. Okay, yeah. And good lighting is very important. It's important to have good lighting on your face so that you can be seen clearly. Maybe Dr. Pandula, you can switch on your video, yeah, and avoid backlight from bright windows, because then you will not be highlighted. Okay, and avoid lighting directly above your head also not a good idea, because there will be shadows, and sometimes the hair color might get changed, and lighting yeah, and also sometimes when it is dark, sometimes you might tend to use the light from the computer screen. Never do that, because then it would be in the dark light, it would look like a horror movie. Now Dr. Pandole is using natural light at the moment.
Yeah, now I have actually closed the curtain, so that means that the light that I get is less, so you can see a little bit dark, but when I remove, then the light improves. So so the natural light can be used during the day. Of course, today is a little bit gloomy, so therefore the light is probably not optimal also. But rather than depending on the natural light, there are light sources that are available now, because there's a lot of online work and Zoom meetings and all going on. If you are a teacher, it might be worth investing in one of these lights that you can use for these kind of sessions. These lights are not necessarily like spotlights, but they are more those lights are able to like spread out the light in front of you, and as a result you get a uniform type of light, and these are available, not very costly I suppose, but it's a worthwhile investment since we are doing a lot of online teaching and all. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, now you can see, yes, thank you very much. So you can see the different ways of using lighting and the impact, so on and so forth. Now again, I'm always using bad examples from me. Say, now this was a conference that I attended. Again, you can see the backlighting is not good, okay, and there is some coloring. Now you can see the resource person from Australia using a very good appropriate background, because you can see the representation. Same with this resource person. Yeah, okay. Another thing is about your clothing. That's very important. If you are using a virtual background, your clothing should not be, say, the green colored. Okay, because that might lead to some problems, green or even blue, because if the green background is there, then if your clothing is also green, that might lead to some confusion, because your green clothing may not be detected by the green screen. Okay, so lighting is very important. If you want to use a professional background, use it in a professional way, in a correct way. Okay. And where you place yourself in the screen also very important. Now, in the middle, it has to be in the middle, and your face has to take maybe about in the middle. About, if you take the length, maybe in the right in the middle, taking about, you should be taking about 50%, not more than 50%. Otherwise, it will be too large. Now, the proportion that you are seeing is generally okay. All these are important, and sometimes you 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 need to adjust the camera. Sorry, you need to adjust the camera in such a way that you will be looking okay. Okay, because the screen camera can be adjusted in such a way that it will be a direct vision of yours, and it might be a good idea to have few books under your laptop or the computer, so that you will be facing the camera directly. Okay. Generally, the camera should be at your eye level or slightly above your eye level. In that way, you will be getting the best visual impact. So all these small tips are very, very important if you want to have the maximum visual impact. Okay. Yeah. Formal attire is very important, and makeup. Sometimes you might want to have makeup, because then the lighting effect would be ideal. But then if you are going to use makeup, it should not be excessive. Good posture. Good posture. Some people prefer even to use the standing position, because then you are more active, you feel more comfortable. But it's not a convenient arrangement all the time. This session also we are doing in a seated position, but these are important. Formal attire. Now there are a lot of jokes going around in regarding the attire that we use during these sessions. No, so I mean, sometimes people focus only on the top half, which is not the ideal. It has to be a formal attire, properly attired, and that gives you the confidence also. So those small things are very, very important. Adjusting the camera, okay, having the camera appropriately at the same height as yours is very, very important. Okay, that's at least at the same eye level. Okay? So yeah, so this is generally, if you can't, you can basically slightly increase the laptop screen. Okay, and then change the built-in camera. It should not be below your, not should not be like this. Okay, it should not be below your eye level. Sometimes you can see things like that. So it focus on the ceiling. It has to be at your eye level. Okay. Yeah. So those are very, very important. Your face has to be in the center. Your face has to be in the center. Filling approximately. Dr. Pandey also can switch on if you prefer. Yeah. Approximately 60-70% of the height of the picture. Okay. And better, don't use phone cameras or tabs, because then again it can be bit of a disaster, because if you move the tab like this or the phone move the phone like that, it's not going to be very visually attractive. Okay, so don't do that. Yeah. So making sure that your camera angle is proper and you are captured properly. Okay. Now this example, I'm using this because there are no identification features. So you have to be very careful in using the camera. You can see here this gentleman is using the camera upside down. So these kind of mistakes we have to avoid all the time. Okay. There are very basic zoom layout views. The active speaker view, the gallery view, okay, minimize view, or the side by side. The active speaker, now I am speaking, okay, this is a default layout. Okay. This is into the large window of the speaker, but here I have switched on my video. But sometimes when you are speaking without the sharing speaker, you can see that. Okay. Yeah, so this is the active speaker view that you can have. Just let me see. Yeah. So this view that we are having at the moment is the active speaker view. Okay. Yeah. Something like that. Focusing very much on the camera. When the speaker is actively speaking, the zoom automatically divert towards that. Yeah, so this is the active speaker view, and others are minimized. This is a gallery view. You can use that when you are using maybe in a meeting or a discussion when you want to get the whole group like this. Or even if you want to get a group photograph, this can be used. This is what we call a gallery view. Sometimes you can minimize the zoom video. That's a minimized view. Okay. Or side-by-side mode. This is also quite nice. This is another conference that we have done. The side-by-side view, okay, can be used so that another speaker joining from some other place and the main center joining together. So this is what we call the side-by-side view. Sometimes in side-by-side view, you can have the speaker view and the presenter's view. That also looks very professional. Okay. Speaker view and presenter's view looks very professional. Or something like this. The chairperson and the speaker at the same time, same screen. This is what we call side by side. Whereas when there is a presentation or discussion is going on, this view can be useful. Okay, yeah. And practice in advance. Okay, speak very clearly, interact with the participants, establish eye contact by focusing on the camera. All these are important because you can't look at them. You have to look at the camera. Then only they will be feeling that you are basically contacting and interacting with them. And keep it simple. Don't, the same principles of PowerPoint presentation apply. Don't try to say too many things and don't overstep. Okay, yeah, and keep into time is very, very important. Okay, since keep into time is very, very important, I'll be stopping my brief introduction at this point and will hand over to Dr. Pandula for his presentation on preparing interactive material and instruction material related to the online learning. Over to you, Dr. Pandula.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, are there any questions you want to raise at this point, or sir, should we move it to the last? So do you think we can have some questions now or move it to the last? So you're on mute. Profendik, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Yeah. So if there are any clarifications, yes.
Yes. If you have any questions, you can either type in the chat or ask, unmute and ask. Right. So as we go along, if you have any questions, you please put it into the chat. Otherwise, you can ask when we have the break at the end, when we go for the discussion. Now we have discussed in terms of online teaching, what we should be doing. And now we will focus a little bit about the most commonly used online presentation tool among us, many of us. It's the PowerPoint, and everyone knows how to use it. Everyone have used it. We have transited from the the transparent slides that we had those days, if you can remember, to electronic online PowerPoint slides. And we do a lot of things with that, isn't it? And it basically gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of presenting the content in an effective manner. Now, of course, as teachers, we have our own styles of presenting, and that is appreciable because everyone is not used to the same form of presenting. So it is very difficult to decide and say this is the way that you should be, making a teaching PowerPoint. And this is the structure that you need to adhere. It may be very difficult to do because we have different teaching styles. However, there are several basic principles that we need to adhere to so that the content that we put in our slides convey what the meaning that we intended. Plus, the audience will be able to gather that meaning without much of an effort, right? As teachers, what we need to do is to minimize the effort the audience has to spend in terms of understanding something. And that's what we basically learn from developing PowerPoint slides to cater to that particular need. I will talk a little bit of theory towards the end, but first of all, we'll go with the practical aspect of it, and you can, we can be very interactive in this. Please do share your experiences as well. Right. Now, can someone say what does this signboard mean to you? Can unmute and talk. Of course, it's a commercial thing, but let's say for the sake of learning, it's a good thing.
Part of the McDonald's sign, sir?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I mean, because they're so popular, it's a brand that is all over the world, and therefore they don't have to do much. So this basically tells us that in order to convey something, you don't necessarily have to put it in words all the time. For them, it's a matter, they don't even need the entire logo, right? They basically just need a stripe and a background color. They are so popular to that extent. Now, we may not be able to teach or tell, say, for instance, if we start a shop somewhere and put a, a box color and a strip, and people might be wondering what the hell this is. But for them, they can. Similar things may exist in terms of teaching also. Certain content areas that we have to deliver, we may be able to deliver through symbolization rather than putting it in words. So basically, these are strategies or behavioral strategies that psychologists and marketing strategists use in modern day advertising. And to an extent, as educators or teachers, we should also be looking at these techniques because they have an impact on the users. Plus, they kind of stick in their mind, right? When you look at it, it sticks in your mind. And that's what we need later on. I mean, in the long term, we as teachers want things we say to stick in our students' heads, right? That's what we always strive to do. And to do that, you don't need to always put it in words. And this is basically just a testimony to that. Now, again, right? This is again basically giving a message to people who looks at it, but it has been made more attractive through use of symbolism. Okay, so indirectly it's saying a different story. Eat more chicken, and those guys who are telling it basically attracts the attention, and it sticks in the minds of the people who are looking at it. So these two, of course, are not educational slides or educationally usable images, but it tells us the story of importance of the symbolism. Less is sometimes more when it comes to teaching and when it comes to developing slides or educational material. And if we think innovatively, then probably we will come up with slides that are more informative than it looks and more useful to the students as well. Now, PowerPoint is a worldwide software that is used worldwide, available. It's a proprietary software, meaning that you have to pay. However, there are other open source softwares as well, OpenOffice and Google Slides also. If you have a Google account, you can use, and those can also do similar things. And PowerPoint is not the only software that is available that can create slides, but that is kind of the most commonly used software, and therefore I will refer it to using the tools, techniques that are there. But generally, these slideshows that we develop, the tools that we use will have the same sort of features. If time permits, I will try to demonstrate certain tools that are available with PowerPoint, but initially we'll discuss how to get the content right. Now, imagine this particular scenario. You have been asked to conduct a session on Introduction to Cell Biology. Just read it for a second. So this is a usual scenario that we have as teachers. We will get to, sometimes do a session. We are given a time slot. Of course, not 30 minutes. You generally get at least 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hour sessions, right? Which are far less effective, if someone asks me, because that's not the time that's not that amount of duration. Students are unable to keep focus, and even the teachers are unable to keep focus. So let's say it's 30 minutes, right? And so this is a scenario where you may encounter. Now, I have prepared a small quiz here. I will copy. Now, to answer this quiz, you have to go to that particular chat and answer. How you do is, I am now posting a link into the chat. You can click on that and select one out of these 4 options, right? One out of these 4 questions. The question is, how many slides will you prepare for that above scenario for your session, 30-minute session that you are given? Let's see what your choices are. Click on that link and select the option. So the early polls suggest that 15 is in front, but you never know. Wonder why 30 and 60 are not getting, because that's the usual number we see. We have 22, 24 responding. Give a few more seconds. Okay, I think it may be safe to assume that many of you prefer 15 slides, while some prefer 5, while nobody seems to prefer 30 or 60. It's unusual because you generally see about 50 to 100 slides when you are doing these kind of sessions, when you ask someone to do this kind of sessions. May I ask one or two of you who selected 5? Why do you say 5? Is there a particular reason? Anyone?
We want time to explain.
You will use
We
the
want time to explain.
All right. So you want time to explain. Therefore, you will have the minimum amount of slides, right? That's your explanation. Anyone else from that group of 5 slides? Any other reason for you selecting 5, opting for 5?
If we go for the 15 slides, there may be confusion.
Mhm.
We are frequently changing the slides because we have only 2 minutes for one slide. That's right.
Right. Okay. So if you say that if it is 15, then you have only 2 minutes per slide, and therefore you have to quickly change, and that may be confusing for others. Okay. Any other comments?
To minimize getting exhausted, to minimize the
To
listening.
minimize? Right. You mean you selected 5, is it?
Yeah, I selected 5
Right.
because
Right. Okay.
minimize the listener getting exhausted.
All right. Okay. Okay. That's a good enough reason, because more content visible means that there's in lot of information that the person has to, assimilate but within a short period of time. Okay. Any other?
Cell biology can be
Sorry?
explained through diagrams, mostly diagrams. So
All right.
one diagram may contain so many information.
Okay. So you don't really need lot of slides, you mean?
Yes.
Right. Okay. That's a good explanation, because this topic is about cell biology, and there's a lot of diagrams involved, and that can give a lot of information rather than text. So you will have opted for 5, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Great.
Concent-
Excellent.
concentration
please.
easy concentration, sir. You can cover
With
it.
less number of slides, is it?
Concentration. So many slides.
Yes. Concentration is easier with less number of slides, you mean, with 5 slides, right? That may be what you're referring to, no? So I take that point. Yes, concentration may also be more because there's like less information. However, there may not be a right or wrong answer. Again, I will tell that it will all depend on what you plan to do, like what's the strategy that you're going to adapt. As someone said, if it is diagrams, you may not need a lot of slides. But certain diagrams you may just want to show, but you may want to move into a more zoomed in version. Then you may have to add slides also. There may be other types of information also that you want to convey. So I don't really see a problem choosing between 5 to 15. You may opt for 15, you may opt for less than that also. These are not ideal numbers also. It's just to get an estimate. It's good that you all feel that you should limit your slides at least, right? Although you have 30 minutes, you may not go for 30 slides or 60 slides, right? By doing that, you will probably leave out a little bit of space for your discussion also, right? If you have 30 minutes, that means out of that 30 minutes, at least you must allow around 10 minutes of discussion and interaction. So you will plan for about 20 minutes, whatever the presentation that you are doing. So therefore, you will even have less amount of time than what was said. So it is up to you to decide how many slides to use or how your approach should be. But the principle behind it will be less is better. So go for the minimum that is needed, because it's less confusing, as somebody said. Easier for the people to concentrate, easier for the teacher to explain, because there's not many that they need to quickly, frequently, rapidly move along, and you will have time for questions, interactions, and so on. Okay, so by answering these questions, we you basically critically look at some of the teaching that you may have already done. You look back and see, okay, how much of content have I been presenting? Is all this content necessary for me to present? Are there things that the students themselves will be able to gather? right? So these are the questions that now you need to answer. Like when we teach, we always have to do that, because I generally, when I make a PowerPoint presentation, the second time I will think again and see, like, did this really work? Like, did this actually convey what I wanted? So I might alter it. So my PowerPoints may never be the same when I do each time, because I try to see what was done well, what was the feedback like, and again try to alter it. All right, so let's move on. For the information, what I have just used here, some of you may have used, this is called Mentimeter. I will just type it in the chat. Mentimeter is a online website. Basically, you have to log in and you can use it free of charge to a certain extent, right? You can make several, like 8 or 9 or 10 questions like this, not necessarily bar charts, but there are multiple ways that you can get students interacted. So rather than me asking a question, if I give like this, I got probably about 30-40 people interacting, right? So in a bigger group, this may be a useful tool for you to use when you are doing a live session. So there's some other learning coming through this as well. So go to the mentimeter.com, I think, or menti.com, and it's easy. It's easy, basically. It's a PowerPoint that you are making. So you just have to select the type of question you want to ask, fill up the boxes, select the background, and you can integrate Menti, whatever the PowerPoint that you did, so whatever the question that you ask, with your PowerPoint slide. So that's what I have done now. The Menti has been integrated into PowerPoint. If time permits, I will show how it is done, right? So just note it down. It may be a useful tool for you as well. Right, so we'll move on. Now, the biggest concern for many of us in terms of presenting is how to present text, right? Just read this text. So I would like to know how many of you are cursing me for asking you to read this. So this is what happens. We have a lot of text in our slides, and the presenter hardly does anything and wants the audience to basically read it. And it's worse when I ask you to read this particular paragraph while I am also talking, because it overloads your system, right? As we know, we have sensors, visual sensors, auditory sensors, and tactile sensors, right? So in online work such as this, we generally address the auditory and visual sensors. Now, when I present text in a slide, basically I am presenting it to the visual sensory pathway, right? When I talk, I basically focus on the auditory sensors. Now, if I am doing, using both channels to deliver the same thing, it's not going to produce a meaningful outcome. Now, say for instance, that happens when I read a slide. So if I say, okay, in presenting text, you have to present your text in a bulleted format so that the audience will be able to gather what you have to say. If I do that, I am basically reading the slides. So I am using both channels at the same time, presenting the same thing, which is very inefficient, right? So ideally what we should do is use the visual channels to presenting symbolized version of what the message I am delivering, while the auditory or my presentation will basically fill in the rest of the information. You hardly will overload each of those channels when you do that, right? Because each of those channels have its own bandwidth. So you will be able to manage it within. However, if you are trying to give the same thing over and over again, and that can basically create a cognitive overload as a whole, and that what that ultimately makes is the processing capacity will be less, and therefore retention will be less. So your students will not be able to hold on to what they have seen or heard or read. They will not be able to hold on, right? So giving a lot of information must be avoided, because that's not going to do any benefits. This is also true when you're putting reading material online. Say if you want your students to read a some text from a textbook with regard to a particular topic, if you try to give them the whole chapter, which is probably not so relevant to that particular section, then the effectiveness may be less than when you give a specific chunk of text related to that particular phenomenon, right? So always, as a teacher developing this content, we have to know how to chunk content, how to break things into pieces, and then bind them logically. And that is what we are doing in a PowerPoint. What we do is basically you chunk a particular message into slides and logically bind them and then tell a story. That's what we do. And it is same with any material that you upload into the web, right? When presenting text, it is also important that text be succinct, use bullet points, maximum 5 to 6 bullet points, no more than 6 words, minimize text size, minimum text size of 18, and always check your spelling, right? No point in having a spell checker in the PowerPoint and in Word and all if you continue to have spelling mistakes. Of course, there can be minor mistakes here and there, but as you can see, right, in this, there were so many spelling mistakes. You may read it correctly, but at different points, there are so many mistakes. Okay, so always make sure that those errors are corrected, because that will not reflect professionally on your work, as well as for the students, it will be a distract because they have to now correct it themselves. And whenever they are expected to do something additional to what you are trying to teach, that means that they are using part of their cognitive load or cognitive space for that particular purpose. So you are minimizing their chances of retaining whatever that you are presenting, right? So it's unnecessarily overloading the student. So always make sure that your spelling is corrected, grammar is correct when you're presenting, and your content is presented in a way that it is clear for the person looking at it. Okay, so this is a slide without spelling checking and some spelling issues intentionally embedded to prove that point. Right. Now, when you're presenting text, it's good to use bullet points, because that will allow you to break down content into points, one, and then for the reader to clearly visualize what's your message is. So that's a useful thing. However, if you use too many bullet points, please be kind enough to use only few bullet points. Having too many bullet points will not only distract the audience, but will prevent your message from being heard. So avoid too many bullet points also, right? So there are ways in which you will decide on how many bullet points needs to be there. That will depend on what you are actually presenting. Few bullet points as possible is the ideal, but in case there are information that you need to present, you can get the core information to the slide and ask the students to refer somewhere else in order to build up their knowledge, right? You can use various images or other things also to present information. Therefore, you can use bullet points sparingly. About 6 to 7 bullet points should be adequate for a slide. And because that will also allow to keep the text adequately large. Otherwise, the text will also be smaller. Okay. Movie. Suddenly my slides got stuck. Sorry. May I stop sharing for a few seconds? I will share again because my slide got stuck. Okay. Is there any questions you want to ask halfway through? Prof. Indika, are you there? You want to add any comments?
This fine. We are moving well, Dr. Pandula. It's fine.
Okay, thanks. Others, any questions you can ask? No questions? Okay. Right, so through this. Okay. Now about presenting images. What do you think about this rabbit? What am I trying to say? Anyone, you can unmute and talk. You can guess. What am I trying to say? Sorry, is that Jayant? We didn't hear you properly.
Hearing properly.
Okay, you think that, okay, hearing properly. Okay, fine. Okay. Any other ideas?
Listen carefully.
Listening carefully, okay.
Attentive listening, sir.
Attentive listening, okay. What else?
Paying attention.
Paying attention, okay. Any other suggestions?
Be alert.
Be alert, okay.
Noise at a distance.
Noise at a distance, okay. All right, I think, you know, whenever you see an image on a slide, you will start thinking, right? We start thinking, okay, what is this rabbit? What's this rabbit doing? What does it mean? Their long ears is being vigilantly looking out, right? We all start. But my only intention of this is to say that you can actually insert an image onto your slide, right? Right? But we have to label this particular image properly when you're putting. I didn't have any intention of discussing alertness. I didn't have any intention of discussing listening or, you know, being vigilant or anything at all. So my intention was not that. But yours, it was different. Okay, so this basically tells us that whenever you put an image, it may be for design purpose. I thought this was the best image that I can find in order to, you know, put it on a side. Some people put images to design purpose, like to give, you know, give some color to it. Whenever you put an image, the audience will start, the students will start thinking, my goodness, how does this relate to this now? Of course, here presenting images, you know, then people will start thinking, okay, this is an image that, you know, that can think. But you yourself said, when I asked the question, of course, you started thinking. But in some instances, people will try to associate the image that they see with whatever the content that is there. So if you put an irrelevant material or an image into your slide, or something totally unrelated, that will add to the cognitive load. Okay. Here, of course, this is triggered by my question, but otherwise people will themselves start, thinking why this is there, how does it relate to this particular topic, and so on and so forth. And when they use their brains or the working memory for that particular processing, the message that I am going to give as a presenter or as a teacher will not use the full capacity of that working memory. So I am using the, student is at a disadvantage, and I will not be able to communicate my message to them properly. Right. So that's the point I just wanted to make. There is some relevance with the rabbit, of course, but as you said, everyone thinks differently, and we all will have to understand that if you put something there, people will start looking at it critical. And that's kind of similar to a research paper. When students write, they will write it in a way to say, okay, nobody will read this, and so on and so forth. So they will write anything and everything that we do with sometimes our research papers as well. But if you put something in a public domain, or in a published, archive, you must expect that someone will read it at some point. And it's the same with our presentation also. Someone will look at it, someone will critically look at it, and will try to assume certain things. So minimizing that is an important element. Now, if you look at these two images, A and B, which image do you think is easier in terms of reading and easier in terms of interpreting, learning?
Image B, sir.
Why do you think it's B?
Because it is indicated the place and they connected the place and the label.
Of course,
The
A
one
has
is,
also tried to do it, but imagine that the numbers are there on the right side, right? The numbers are missing, I think. Imagine the numbers were there with that list. So it is also labeled, and the list is also there, and more information is also there. Why do you think B is easier?
Because that image 1, there should be hard to
Why is it
find the
hard?
information. Yeah, in the image 1.
Imagine that it also kind of is in the big screen. It has been zoomed and it's there in the big screen. Why is it hard when compared to B? Do you have a specific reason for it? Others?
Yes, sir. No numbering, letters for that label.
All right. Let's imagine that there is numbering. Just imagine that that list also has numbering.
Yes, sir. Very confused.
Confusing. Why is that? What do others think? Why is it so difficult? Of course, if it is numbered, why is it difficult to interpret or read A when compared to B?
Use of we have to see the picture at one time and see the label again. And
right. Why is it easier than the other picture? Why do you think?
Easy to catch up, sir.
Right. What do you mean by catch up?
One shot we can see the both the parts and the letters. One shot.
Right. I like this word, one shot, because why I said it's I like that word, because it tells a story that it introduces an extra step, isn't it? You have to first look at the number, and then you have to look at the list. Imagine that the list is numbered. Then you have to go one by one and go to that particular number, and then identify what that marked object is. You have introduced 2 additional steps. In B, you have avoided that 2 steps and given a one-shot understanding of what this particular bone is. So see, inadvertently, you have minimized the effort for students to read or interpret something by naming or labeling a particular image in a different way. So the first way is the usual textbook appearance. Of course, that has a has its own users, space plus more information and so on. But when you're presenting, it may be best to label things at the point where you need them to basically see, so that there's less confusion, less time spent, and minimum effort within a small period of time for audience to identify what you're actually talking about, right? So these are few points that we may be able to use when designing slides. What about this slide?
It's, I think it's a very more complicated one.
Complicated, yes, exactly. But generally you see these things in presentations, right? So there is a usual statement that follows this image. I would, if I am the presenter, I would usually say, I know that you can't see it very clearly, but that's how I start. As the presenter, I know that the audience cannot read this, they don't know what this is, and they cannot even point to anything that I am talking about. But still, I include it to show generally the work that has gone into. If it is a scientific presentation, we like to include it to show the complexity of it. But now we are doing a teaching activity, right? So if you are doing a teaching activity, it's always important for us to extract from anything that you are presenting. It may be a table, it may be a diagram, it may be a complex network such as this. We may be able to zoom in and highlight the area that we want to show. That is where the animations and other tools will also be helpful actually in presenting things. But if it is unreadable, if it cannot be comprehended, no point in wasted that time to having it in a slide. It can be given as a reading material, an extra attachment or extra reading material for the students. Colors. Now, in the scenario, we noted that the slide, the projector was not having difficulties in using certain colors. So it's important for us to know beforehand whether our projectors and things work properly, and that's where the practice counts. Otherwise, what will happen is, if we depend a lot on colors, the contrasting will not happen, and ultimately you will basically have an odd-looking slide. Now, when using colors, these are the things that you need to remember. Use colors wisely. If you don't, the text will become unclear. It can lead to confusion, distraction, headache, nausea, vomiting, and even loss of bladder control. Right? That's of course a joke. But the color contrast is an important element when you are designing your PowerPoint slides. Adhering to a policy of consistency is a good thing, right? Consistency in the sense, if you're using colors, use a color template that will consistently appear, but not overdo it to the extent that your text and the background is not contrasting enough. Because now if you see this text, it's not contrasting enough, isn't it? And it will be very difficult for the audience to gather, concentrate on this. This is also an extraneous cognitive load, as we call it. Extra load for your cognitive process, the working memory, because we have to put more effort to contrast between the text and the background. As soon as we make our students or the listeners concentrate more on what you're showing, even in the case of that complex diagram, you basically take out part of your working memory capacity out. So basically you are left with probably 80% of the capacity in the audience to deliver your content. So important that we use colors wisely. Same with the animations, right? Animations are good, and it allows us to, introduce points one by one, or content one by one, according to the, now we have been doing this with our transparent slides also those days, when we had the overhead projectors, what we do is we place the transparency, you write it on, and what do you do in order to prevent the audience from seeing rest of the points in the transparency?
We just keep
What was the practice?
we just keep the book
exactly. Yeah. You use a maybe a A4 sheet or something covering the rest of the text, and you basically gradually, bring it down in order to expose the rest of the content in the transparency. This is the same thing that we do in animation using PowerPoint. You put animation so that point by point it appears, and therefore you can discuss each point. However, mind you, when you put animations, you are adding extra bit of time, right? So unless you have practiced it and planned for it, you may take a lot of time for each point. So suddenly you have only single slide, 5 points. You probably will take the time of 5 slides when you use animations, right? So you have to use it sparingly, knowing that it may take a lot of time. Now here, after the however, I have been speaking for about a minute now, right? So that's the same thing that will happen. However, when you use too much animation, could make the audience dizzy, frustrated, annoyed, and also, therefore, we should minimize animation, right? It can be used because now the PowerPoint provides so much of animations, effects, and all sorts of things. That is because PowerPoint is not only used for formal, educational, scientific presentation. It can be used for birthday parties, it can be used for greeting cards, can be used for all sorts of things. And therefore, there are so many effects available. So don't use those things unnecessarily when we present educational content. Sometimes it can lead to confusion as well, and unnecessarily time taking, as well as technically also it might create issues in some of the softwares or some of the machines that students use to view, and therefore minimizing animations is always good, but sparingly use, because that can also help. All right. So this is basically few thoughts around developing your PowerPoint slides in order to convey your message as a teacher. Any questions you want to ask?
So if we have a poor signal when you are doing it online, with this animation, will it affect will it take extra bytes for animations?
I don't know exactly, but I don't think it does, unless you have videos and if you have very high-end animations. But if you have these just point by point appearing type of animation, it will not take that much of bandwidth. Anyway, when you start sharing, it will take a little bit of more bandwidth. That's why sometimes we cannot keep our videos on during high bandwidth usage time, like in the morning hours. Sometimes our networks are like plugged with a lot of usage. So therefore, when you start videos and start the sharing, it can become slower. But animations might not add too much of an issue if you are using it sparingly. But I'm not sure with the new type of particularly when there are background moving animations. PowerPoint allows you to put background moving animations. And when you put those,
that's what I'm asking also. Yes.
Yeah, it might cause. Yeah, it might cause. Of course, that is the problem is more if your machine is also not so capable in handling that. Say if you don't have enough memory, anyway, the PowerPoint will be slow in your machine, even without online.
Yes,
but when you're presenting generally, it should not be the case, because we even play videos also. No? So I'm not sure whether there is a difference in terms of use of bandwidth on that. I should get back to you on that. I'm not sure about it. But definitely when you use background videos, your machine, if it is slow, then your PowerPoint will also, there's chance that it also will get slow.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So when we are asking questions,
Yeah.
there will be a problem. So the problem is more are try to unmute their mics, and the big noise will disturb us to.
True. So what you can do is, there are, I mean, as the way I see it, there are two sides to the story. One is that our students are not so proactive enough, so that there will be very much less people wanting to unmute, but that's a different story. But if you have that problem, a tool like this Mentimeter that I have just shown, or the polls feature in Zoom, I don't know whether you have used it. There is a similar feature in Zoom also, where you can create quizzes. So whatever the question that you want to pose to the students, you can put it as a quiz or some sort of a question where they have to do some interaction. So there are multiple types of interactions in Mentimeter. If you create that, you can allow more people to take part as well as to contribute to the discussion. Then you can point out, now I asked in that particular thing, I asked, okay, those who have said 5, can someone say why you used 5 slides? You then limit the group into a smaller group, right? So then not everyone will start unmuting and try to answer. So those kind of things you may be able to use instead of just asking a question and allowing them to answer. At the same time, you can ask them to type it in the chat. That is also a good way, because then you see people typing, and then you can go one by one, or generally you still scroll through and say what sort of answers they are getting, and you can point to 1 or 2 people and ask them to elaborate also. So we may have to use those alternative methods when you have a bigger group, and also they are very interactive in terms of communication. So that's an excellent question. I think that's a common problem that we also have. Did I answer your question, Kalyan?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Prof. Indika, do you want to add anything to that?
Not into that, Pandula. I think, yeah, one comment regarding, say, the slide preparation or the position in which you has shown some time ago. That's very, very important when you are say preparing a PowerPoint slide. It's very important what we call juxtapositioning. You position the material in such a way that it will attract attention and it will make some meaning. Say, if you describe about something, then if you put a photograph of that is relevant to that, or an image in a different place, that will lead to a confusion. So when you are designing your slide layout, based on what Dr. Pandula was also telling, positioning your text and positioning your images in an appropriate way, so that taken together, that will provide a powerful message, is very important. That principle is called juxtapositioning. That's one comment I want to make, that was related to your previous explanation about how to label and how to put images.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that inputs. Any other questions? Okay, so shall I move into a little bit of a demonstration in PowerPoint,
Please.
Which will be helpful for our us in practicing.
Please do.
So here, what I am trying to basically show is I'm basically sharing my whole desktop in this. I hope you can see the PowerPoint slide design view here. You can see my desktop.
Yes,
right. Okay, great. So what I'm just trying to point to, many of you would have already used it and have been using it for for the last 2-3 years. But I just want to show you these tools that may be helpful for us to be better in terms of what we do, what we present, and so on. In particular, it is So in terms of designing, a simple advice that that can be given is that be consistent in terms of the design. For instance, now if I start to develop a new PowerPoint presentation, right? You can see a new slide here, right? Now, say I'm putting the so I'm doing a presentation, sample presentation. Now we all know that we add a new slide, right? After the initial title slide, we add a new slide. You generally get two text placeholders like this, right? One to put your heading, and then second is to put a list of bullet points, right? So if I say my first slide is explaining the learning outcomes to the students, so I would name it accordingly, right? Learning outcomes. Now, the next slide that now in this I will say LO1, LO2, LO3, right? In the next slide, when I go to the next slide, again, I get the same layout, right? Now, if I change the layout according to my wishes, now, for instance, here I will call this introduction, right? And put a few bullet points here. And then another slide, I will say method or something, imagining that this is a scientific type of presentation. Now, when you look at this slide, whatever the content it is, when I present it, if you can see the presented slide, there is some consistency. The first slide appears the title slide, and then you have the learning outcomes. Now focus on the heading, right? Where the learning outcomes appear. The next heading appears in the same place, same size, same text style. Third one also appears in the same place, same size, same text size, and so on. That is consistency in terms of the design, right? Now, from an educational point of view, when you are doing an educational presentation, that consistency matters because the students or the audience will try to map it within their heads where this fits. So now imagine that I have this learning outcomes, say, in a small letter, and then I make the introduction, kind of big, right? And then again method, in a different way, small letters and so on. Now when I play this, it's inconsistent, right? See, now for the person who's looking at it, this inconsistency is confusing. It doesn't allow them to map it out, to say that this is a main topic, this is a subtopic, this fits with the previous one. That schema is important for a learner. And therefore, when we make PowerPoints, it's important that we stick to a consistent layout in terms of organizing content. And the easiest way to do it is using the default. But if it is not, you always have this option here. Now, as you can see, just next to the new slide, you have this option called layout, right? Layout. In the layout option, you see multiple layouts, different types of layouts. First one is for title. Second one is the one that we by default get as the second, third, and the fourth slides. And then you see that there are layouts that allows two contents, comparisons, content with caption, and so on. These are common layouts that has already been made, which we can apply so that it's easier for us to arrange content, and also to keep the text in a consistent size, right? Otherwise, we all have to do it manually. But this is also not to say that you have to always adhere to the given layouts, but you can create your own. You can have your own sizes, own styles. That is okay as far as you are consistent throughout your presentation. So that's one point to note. The second point I wanted to, any questions on that? Anything you wanted to ask? Of course, this is basic stuff. You may have already used it knowingly or unknowingly. Okay. The second thing I just want to show was the review pane. When I say review pane, sorry, this menu is blocking, right? In the PowerPoint, you see that there is an option called review, right? When you click on the review, sorry, not review, slideshow. So slideshow option. In the slideshow option, as you move in, you note that there are several options that we can use to practice our presentation. And as teachers or as presenters at any fora, it's important for us to really do whatever the presentation that we do at least once or twice to gauge how much of time that we have to put, how much of time that we have to spend in each of the slides, and so on, so that we stick to the timing, we stick to acceptable pace, rather than having to quickly wrap it up at the end, right? So this basically allows that. For instance, there is an option called rehearse timing. Now, I'm not sure how you will see this, but when I press rehearse timing, this is what you will see. Can you see multiple screens in this now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. So what you see here is actually called the presenter view. And in that, you can see upper left-hand corner, there is a timer. Now it's at 20 seconds, 21, 22, and so on. That's the total duration that I have spent on this PowerPoint now, on this first slide, right? I am still on the first slide. In the bottom, you see rest of the slides. So if I had 30 slides, all 30 will be there, but you have to scroll it. Then the slide to appear next is on the top upper right-hand corner. What you see is actually the next slide, right? It was a blank slide, as I remember. That slide is there. Underneath is click to add notes. Now, this is the place where you can have your say points that you should be speaking while the slide is on. All right, I will explain that before coming to this again. Now, going back to our design mode, I will stop this. Stop. Do you want to know? Right. So I'm back at the design screen. If you can see it again, right? If you notice, under each slide there is a small small box type of thing. I will take this. So here I'm not really seeing it for some reason, but you will notice that there is a line that you can actually push up. So I think I'll have defaulted, remove it. Right, this is called the notes page. Now I am showing it in a different view. I went to view and there I have said notes page, but I will go to normal view. There I should be able to see. Now here, now I am dragging this line up and down, and you should be able to see a small box there, right? Place where I can type. This is the place where you can type your notes related to that particular slide. So I will say introduce. So I'm giving myself instructions, right? Introduce yourself, explain the importance of the lecture, right? If I want to tell a joke, that also I can say, tell a joke, right? So I get reminded of that. So in the other slide, I might say in the notes, additional information that I may. So learning outcome 1, LO1. So LO1, I will say, this is one of the core outcomes of the course. So to emphasize on that, right? I am putting a note to emphasize on that. In other instances, you might decide to put information that your students might want into the notes, so that you can take a printout and give the notes to your students, right? So this is something that you can use it to in many different ways. Why I told you this was when I go back to that slideshow and go to rehearse timing, right? Now you can see whatever that I typed in the notes pages appearing on this box, right? So with the first slide, I have to now talk about introducing myself, explaining importance of the lecture, and I have to tell a joke also, right? Now, mind you, I mean, although you see this, the audience, when you project this or when you record this video or PowerPoint at the end, they will not see this. If you are doing it live, they will not see it. They only see the slide. But you see all of these because this is the presenter view, right? So you no longer have to write things on your paper. You can have it in the notes and use it as a way of reading or way of reminding you of the things that you are supposed to talk, right? So I move from here to the next. Now I have spent 49 seconds on this slide. I move to the next, right? Next slide. And then talk in that as well, and so on. So basically what this allows me is to rehearse the whole PowerPoint and then decide how much of time that I have spent as a whole in this particular slideshow. So if I have only 10 minutes or 20 minutes to do, I can do it and see whether I can finish it in 20 minutes. If not, you can shorten certain segments, you can remove certain slides. That's how you basically develop yourself adhering to that particular time that you are given. Otherwise, you will always overdo it and you will always go beyond the allocated time, right? Now, at the same place, you have another option that that may be again be useful. That is record slideshow. Now, in this instance, what we do is you basically record your PowerPoint with your voice, basically with your narration. Now, when you do that, when you say record, you get the same. So I don't know, it's saying it will like to access my camera, but I don't know whether it will interfere with the PowerPoint. I will just say okay, but I'm not sure whether that, right. Can you all see that I am now appearing on the corner of the slide?
Yes.
Yes. That's me, right? Okay. So basically here I am now recording, not yet. I have not yet started because I have to press this red button here, start recording. What I am doing is creating a PowerPoint presentation with my visual is also on as well as my sound, right? So when I start recording, I will be given a countdown. Now I basically start doing the presentation. So I will say, welcome students, this presentation is about, cell biology or something like that. And once I done with this particular slide, I can move to the next. Then I continue to present it with appropriate actions or whatever that you need. And also I have these markers so that I can do any notes in the screen as well, right? So I can draw certain things. If I wish I would like to do, right? I can draw stuff also, right? Not a funny face, but I can do something relevant to that particular program. I can erase also. Okay. And can you see there is two timers now? There is a timer which is on the right side. That is the total time you have spent. The left side time is actually the time you spend on this particular slide. So you know how much you have been spending on each of the slides. So I move from this to the next now, right? So likewise, I will complete the PowerPoint, and at the end, it will automatically stop. I don't know whether it's recorded or not. Let's go back and see. Yes. Now you can see I have a PowerPoint with my video embedded at the bottom, right? Now, of course, I can hear it. You will not be able to hear it because my sound is not shared. But when I start this PowerPoint, right? You can see I am talking. I can hear it, but you're not. But this is a self-running PowerPoint. I don't have to do anything now because it's already recorded and the PowerPoint moves itself. And this is how you create a self-running PowerPoint for your students. And you can then share it in the LMS so that the students will then have some sense of personalized content for them, because you see that they see the teacher also in the slide, and they hear the voice, and so they will not lose much in terms of following a lecture. So this slideshow menu in the PowerPoint is a quite useful menu, and therefore please use it, and that can improve content development to a certain extent. So that is actually what I intended to do today. Prof. Indika, do you have anything to add on there?
Nothing to add in a technical wise, because we have covered all the necessary things related to that. Yeah, maybe only the general statement I can make is that the object, like the same principles of lesson planning applies to this as well. So the same principles of education that you are very familiar with, working out what are the objectives that you want to achieve during this particular session, and then identify the necessary content areas and keeping it simple, and identifying different technological aspects. It could be video, it could be the same Zoom conferencing, it could be interactive slide or quiz or anything. You have to identify what the content, how you can present the content. So proper designing is very important before you conduct any online session. This design part of identifying what's the message that we want to give, what are the objectives, and then aligning the content with that objective, then the arranging in content in such a way, and then appropriately identify what are the different methods of presenting that content. Those principles are applicable whether it's online or real time or face-to-face blended. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, sir. You are absolutely correct. What we have today discussed is largely an in-between step, not the very beginning of content designing or content development, because there's a lot of planning, learning outcomes, development of learning outcomes, planning of the session, organizing of the content. All those has to be done prior to coming into the design part of it. So the PowerPoint design is basically a step that would come in later, but that is what we consider the content development, and that is an important element, because we all as teachers ourselves have to do these things, because we don't have resources to depend on in terms of developing a PowerPoint. Some will have, but many will not depend on developing this content. So we all, if we know that these features are available, then of course at least we can Google it and see like how to do, what the steps are, and certain things. Sometimes you can't learn everything at one go. Like even if learning PowerPoint, it's not you can't fulfill the learning to an extent, because they update it regularly. So the features that you have today, in a few weeks time you will have more features, additional features, so you are not prepared for it. But as you move in, you will be able to learn by using the internet, or by trying out, testing in various forms. You will be able to learn it, because these are mostly developed in such a way that anyone can learn it without much of an effort. But of course you have to do it. So applying these techniques, tools, and so on, trying it out will be the best way to learn it. Any questions that we can answer? We have few minutes, I think.
So
No, you can put it. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So as a nursing tutor, we have more content to cover in minimum slides. How we can let them to take notes.
During an online session, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. this is the thing. Now, of course, taking notes is that's their own the student. Now, these are adult learners, right? So we cannot force them to take notes, or we don't need to do that, because there are enough places for them to learn whatever the content that we are teaching them in a very in few seconds actually. So if they want to learn about, say, cell biology, they just have to type it in the Google and you have enough resources. Not necessarily from University of Colombo, but you can learn from Harvard University just by typing it in Google, right? So the technology has developed so much. What is important for our students or the adult learners to know is where the information is, rather than what is the information that they want. If they have the core concepts, they can learn at any time. They can learn, the limitlessly by using these resources. So the traditional modes of teaching or asking people to take notes, if they wish, because there are certain learners who will thrive on taking notes and they wish to take it. But of course, if you are giving your, whatever the session that you do as a link for them to follow up, now similar to this particular session, we will share a video link and you can at any time go through this particular video. Similarly, we allow our students also to follow these lecture sessions online at any time. So even in the night, they can actually listen to the lecture session that was done previously, which is a which is a luxury that we did not have those days, isn't it? I mean, we didn't have a way of going back to that lecture and listening to it. We might have felt asleep during the day, so that's it. Basically, we missed it. But nowadays, it's not the case. The lecture is available in the net or the LMS. They can go and listen to it. If they don't wish to learn from us, the same topic may be covered by a professor in University of Oxford. They may be able to go to YouTube and learn from that. So I think we don't need to worry too much about that. If we plan to deliver the key concepts, not necessarily the whole thing, because I think practically we cannot do that. So as much as possible, let the students take on their information seeking. And I think if we plan for it, that's why the curriculum changes happen, make the students more engaged, give them more interactive activities they can work with, come up with assignments or projects, or do things. So those things are what we can additionally do to overcome that if that is an issue. Prof. Indika, do you want to add anything to that particular question?
Pandla, can you little away from the? Can you repeat the question?
Kalyan, you can ask the question from Prof. Indika also.
So I asked, we have more content to cover with minimum slides. How we can let them to take notes while doing the lecture online? That is my question.
Yeah. Yes. So I was basically explaining about the importance of information, knowing where the information is, rather than, getting the information, as well as giving them different opportunities, like the video recorded version to be listened to later on, or watch the video, or resources that they can learn from. And so anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I don't have anything to add there. Basically, yeah, Karin, don't be compelled to put all the information that you want to give to the students, especially in online learning session. It is applicable to any kind of learning. As teachers of higher education, we are more facilitators of learning rather than just content providers. So don't burden yourself by providing all the content areas that you wish them to know and try to give them in a slide. One thing that is not possible, and educationally also that may not be very effective, because again, Dr. Pandula initially very correctly mentioned about the cognitive overload. So we have to be very careful in that. What we can give is the overall framework, the concept and the framework and the guidance. And in online learning, actually there are many opportunities of doing that, because again, I think Dr. Pandu mentioned them very correctly and very comprehensively. There are many ways you can give the video the recorded video can be made available to them at YouTube. Or during the session also you can ask questions so that they can make notes. Even that the chat feature could be used for them to get the enough information that is there. There are many ways, and you can give links to different websites and different other resources that also can be provided or shared during the chat feature. So it's a matter of using this resource available to you, so you can provide multiple resources of information to them, guiding them. Use a chat feature, give links, all these things are possible. So it is their responsibility to go into those areas and learn from them. So plan your session in such a way you are only guiding towards the information. I think that nothing to add. I mean, I agree with what you say, Dr. Vandul.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Right. So if there's no questions, I think we can then conclude the session. Prof. Indika?
Yes, I think we have learned a lot of important things, and a lot of material, a lot of basic information and practical information related to planning and conducting and interactive online teaching session. So it's a matter of putting them into practice, sticking to the basics and putting them into practice. And then I thank everyone, all of you, for joining this session, and especially Dr. Rizka for arranging, organizing everything, because you were the person in charge of this symposium, and Dr. Pandula, my co-resource person, and all of you, the participants, and also the Ministry of Health, everyone from the ETNR unit has supported, and all of you have joined. So let's make use of this session and try to improve our teaching into the next level, because in new normal situation that is very, very important. So across the board in the health sector, let's make use of this information and the knowledge that you have gathered today to improve the education in the new normal, because we have to equip with this kind of information if you have to face this challenge. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Rizka and Dr. Vandal.
Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Rizka.
Yeah, so thank you very much for a very comprehensive and engaging session which addressed practical issues encountered and made us reflect on, I guess, the approach towards the online session. So as Prof. Indika said, I would completely agree. I think we should move away from looking at an online session as how, or rather convert a face-to-face session to an online session. It's not that. You may want to co-chair, you may want to spend some time, think about the lesson design. You may want to include several activities to increase your interactiveness, because that's an aspect that everyone talks about when it comes to an online session. So thank you very much. But as promised, I'm going to take this opportunity to invite all of you to the rest of our sessions of the conference. We have 2 more webinars lined up for you. On the 11th of October, we have a session on quality assurance. And on the 13th of October, we have a webinar on effective feedback in the workplace. Then we have an array of regional workshops organized by some of our key universities, such as the University of Colombo, University of Kelaniya, University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, as well as Jaffna, commencing on the 8th of November. And our main conference is scheduled on the 19th and 20th, followed by a post-conference webinar on the 25th of November. So for further details, kindly visit our website, colombocme.org, or the College of Medical Education's Facebook page. So we've got an interesting lineup of events for you. We hope to see all of you at the conference. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can get the recording, no? Hello?
Yes, the links to the recorded sessions will be shared to you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.